Hi, folks, and welcome back to the Privacy PowerUp series. I'm Val Ilchenko, General Counsel and Chief Privacy Officer at TrustArc, and today we're diving into a core skill that every privacy, legal, security, and compliance pro should understand: incident response. You've probably seen headlines about data breaches, often dramatic stories with big fines, regulatory scrutiny, and reputational fallout. But behind those headlines are dedicated professionals working tirelessly to help manage incidents with care and urgency, limit harm, manage legal obligations, and keep things running smoothly. Today, we'll cover some considerations and common practices for how privacy pros prepare for and respond to incidents effectively. If you already have an incident response plan or IRP in place, that's your first stop. It likely outlines many of the steps we'll walk through. But if you don't, or if you're not sure where to begin, we'll talk through key actions and considerations to help guide your thinking. And in the final section, we'll revisit the benefits and necessity of a well-documented IRP to help streamline and simplify this process. Whether you're new or have been through some high-pressure moments already, this one's for you. First, not every incident is a breach. Let's start with a common misconception. Not every incident is a breach. A security incident could be, for example, any event that impacts or could impact the confidentiality, integrity, or availability of data or systems. A data breach, however, typically involves the unauthorized access, use, or disclosure of personal or confidential info. The key takeaway here is that typically you won't know if it's a breach until you investigate. That's why every incident should be treated seriously and escalated through your response process. Here are a few quick examples of how things may begin. A sensitive email sent to the wrong person, a third-party vendor system being compromised, file sharing settings accidentally exposing internal documents, a stolen laptop where unencrypted data is accessed, or notice of a ransomware extortion attempt or attack. Additionally, given the variety of potential ways these events may originate or begin, it's important that your incident response plan accounts for a range of scenarios. Let's start with what you should ask. When an incident comes across your desk, often at the most inconvenient times, why aren't these bad guys more considerate, eh? Start with a few key questions. First, what happened? When did it occur? What systems or data are involved? And has the situation been contained? Or is there still an active threat or additional risk or harm being incurred? If you have an IRP, some of these initial questions and even the potential risk levels may already be predefined or suggested through incident categorization frameworks, such as those that include something called a P level. Usually, although not always, a P1 or P0 designation indicates a very high potential risk, like a potential breach involving customer data, which may require legal notification, regulatory reporting, executive involvement, etc. At this stage, you should still be gathering facts and not making assumptions. Once you start to receive some or all of these answers and have more context, this information will help shape next steps and determine who needs to be involved. To help ensure assessments and processes are consistent, it helps to use incident categorization standards, and these help to classify things like risk level, type, priority, and support aligned response steps. And for example, just as one methodology that you could use, not for P levels, but to kind of identify stages of an incident, is the National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, 4-phase lifecycle. It's called a Special Publication 861 Rev 2. You don't need to memorize that. I just wanted to give it to folks if they're curious. But the phases under SP 861 Rev 2 are preparation, detection and analysis, containment, eradication, and recovery. That's all one phase, by the way, and post-incident activity. And these are not completely linear. So if you've ever seen like a graphic or a chart, some of these steps may occur kind of in succession, or you may bounce back and forth, and especially things like containment, eradication, and recovery. Part of that is hardening and fortifying, which is also around preparation, etc. So you'll see a little bit of cycling there as well. So this life cycle gives some structure and consistency to status and management of incidents. But for those seasoned pros who are listening, you may already know, or maybe worth noting, that NIST has actually updated its standard to SP 861 Rev 3. That introduces a 6-function incident response process, but both versions are still used in the field, and revision 2 remains widely cited and applied, and it's kind of easier to understand, especially as you're an earlier stage for some. Next, let's get into some common considerations and steps that tend to come up during incident response. Understanding the blast radius is really important. Once an incident is identified, it's important to assess potential impact, or as I like to call it, the blast radius. Some things you should consider, ask, and analyzing the blast radius are, Whose data is involved? Was it customers? Was it employees? Was it vendors? As part of this question, understand where these individuals, if applicable, are located, so you can understand if this pertains to, for example, German data subjects under GDPR or California individuals under CCPA and so on. Next, it's important to ask about what kind of data it is, which is different than what's involved, because it could be about a customer, an employer, vendor, or a data subject. But now we're talking about a little bit more granularly. What kind of data are we talking about? Is it contact information? Is it social security numbers? Is it financial data? Is it health data? Is it unstructured, customer uploaded data, etc.? And then similarly, how is that data used? Is it in structured systems for an HR record for a social security number, or is it something like a video recording like this one? Additionally, you should ask questions like how many records are or may be affected. This is important because a bunch of different laws have thresholds where if there's a certain amount of records affected, you might have other obligations or other reporting. And then what harm could result? Identity theft, legal exposure, reputational harm, embarrassment, etc. Either to you or these folks who are involved or impacted. Understanding the impact is essential to guiding your response and helping to meet your legal and contractual obligations once you have a confirmed and not suspected impact assessment, which is our next step in this process. Know your legal and contractual duties. Privacy obligations vary not only by jurisdiction, but also by things like industry and the type of information impacted. Just a few examples. In the US, every state just about has its own breach notification law, albeit they do carry many similarities, but there are some things that are different. Some timelines are 30 days, some are 45 days, some are as soon as practicable or similar. And then there are other, specific data type regulations like HIPAA, which is about protected health information. And that has the requirement of notifying without unreasonable delay, but no later than 60 days. Then you look at places like Europe under the EU or UK version of GDPR. And if you're a data controller, it's 72 hours of becoming aware. While if you're a data processor, it's actually without undue delay. So slightly different standards there as well. It's also important to remember your contracts. Many data processing agreements or customer terms also include stricter terms. Sometimes as short as 24 hours of becoming aware and sometimes under different triggers for notification than the law. If you're acting as a service provider or data processor, you may have to notify your clients who then, where applicable, have to determine if they themselves have to notify end users as well. As part of incident response planning, it's important to know your contracts and know your timelines. Let's talk about that next. Escalation and internal coordination. It's important to understand that incident response is a team sport. Privacy pros shouldn't go at it alone, and frankly, in many situations can't. In numerous scenarios, the security team or other stakeholders may have been the first to detect or be made aware of a potential incident before the privacy or legal team were even looped in. Either way, once you're involved or an incident is underway, it will be important to involve the right stakeholders early. Legal, security, product engineering, communications, and leadership are some common examples of folks, but each scenario may involve different players. For example, you might involve engineering if the issue is related to customer data maintained in a software environment, HR if the incident involves employee data, or marketing if customer communications or systems they manage are affected. Additionally, if and where needed or appropriate, you should consider consulting internal or external counsel on when to engage, for example, a forensic investigator or law enforcement. Similarly, decisions about when and how to notify your cyber insurance provider often involve legal or finance teams to help ensure coverage requirements are met and coordinated appropriately. Further, you should be mindful and intentional about communications in general. Limit discussions to a core group, avoid unnecessary email threads, assume everything written may be reviewed later, and become well-versed in things like attorney-client privilege and understanding what could become discoverable under legal proceedings. As such, consider how to communicate clear guidelines on internal confidentiality, preserving privilege, who has the authority to internally declare a breach, and who needs to be involved in each stage of the response. Ideally, all of this is documented in your incident response plan or IRP and regularly reviewed with relevant stakeholders. Let's move on to the next step, when and how to notify. If you determine that a notifiable breach has occurred, this could be for a variety of reasons ranging from triggering clear laws on the matter to contractual provisions requiring notice to business considerations such as reputation and optics to ethical considerations. Notifications will need to be timely, appropriate, and in some cases structured or formatted in a specific way. For example, jurisdictions like California and the UK prescribe things like certain content or formats or delivery methods, like an online portal. Similarly, your contracts may require, or certain industries may require, additional specific disclosures of notice requirements. As part of this process, it's important to identify who needs to receive such notice, such as regulators, impacted individuals, business partners, and the public. When you are notifying in a non-prescriptive format, consider crafting messages that are fact-based, empathetic, and actionable, and also, as appropriate, evaluate providing resources such as call centers, FAQs, and call monitoring. What you offer is also something that could be based on contractual obligations, industry requirements, standard practices in your field, or legal or regulatory requirements. And next, it'll be important to do things like document and learn. Once an incident is resolved, conduct a post-incident review. Document things like what happened, what steps were taken, who was involved, and what decisions were made and why. Use the opportunity to identify breakdowns, strengthen your process, and fortify your organization's ability to help prevent future occurrences. This might include revising policies, updating configurations, investing in further people, processes, technologies, etc. Consider using things like metrics such as detection and response time, notification delays, and number of records impacted. Feed findings into your playbook, update trainings, and run new tabletop exercises to keep your response plan current. So to wrap up with some final thoughts, remember to prepare. Build your playbook before you need it, and preparation is where privacy pros can lead. Developing a robust incident response plan that includes things like who's on the response team, how incidents are triaged and prioritized, key decision makers, documentation requirements, escalation protocols and cross-functional roles, and pre-drafted templates for external and external communications. Additionally, either real-world scenarios, simulations, or tabletop exercises are essential. If you're not going through real-life scenarios regularly, you should at minimum run at least an annual exercise with privacy, legal, security, comms, and leadership. Simulate different scenarios such as hackers, DDoS attacks, ransomware threats, data loss, misdirected emails, and others, and observe how your team responds. Preparation should also involve considering tools like data mapping so you know where your data is, or using risk registers if you don't use one for something like a SOC 2 audit, incident tracking dashboards, and forensics provider lists if you have to break glass in case of emergency. And again, that might be something that your insurance provider may or outside counsel may have help with in terms of forensics providers. Incidents are unpredictable, but your best defense is preparation, teamwork, and continuous improvement. As a privacy pro, you're essential to protecting data, minimizing risk, and maintaining trust. That's all for season 2 of Privacy PowerUp series. If you haven't, go back and watch the previous videos in this season, assess the risk before it hits, contracts that count, sell, share, or beware, vendor management, tracking technologies untangled, and from data inventory to data classification. Thanks for watching.